Tell me where you've been going. Tell me it isn't what it looks like.
If you have to ask, you've already decided. Nothing changes that tonight. There's already a full match on file. It's Jaylah. She never told either of you.
2 years and she said nothing? None of us ever knew?
Are you feeling any better, sweetheart?
My head still hurts a little bit, Mommy.
The doctor said you just need some rest.
Okay, I love you.
The call came at 2:47 in the morning, and Jaylah Bishop's hands were shaking before she even answered the phone. It wasn't her ex-husband's number on the screen. It was Dr. Helen Osei, the one person from that old life who still had her number, and who had never once used it. Jaylah picked up anyway. "It's Hannah," the doctor said, her voice tighter than Jaylah had ever heard it. "You need to get to Hartwell Children's Hospital right now." Jaylah didn't ask why a doctor was calling the mother, who wasn't even on the approved emergency contact list anymore. She was already pulling on her coat, already running down 3 flights of stairs into the cold Meridian City night, her car keys cutting into her palm from how tightly she gripped them. 2 years ago, she had promised herself she would never willingly set foot near that family's world again. And yet here she was, running toward it in the dark, one question pounding through her chest louder than her own heartbeat. What was wrong with her daughter? And why, after 2 years of being erased so completely from that family's life, was she the very first person they called? To understand why that phone call broke every rule of the Kang family's carefully guarded world, you have to go back 5 years, to a marriage that once looked like a fairy tale and ended like a verdict. Jaylah had been a kindergarten teacher at Brightwood Elementary when she met Min-Jun Kang, the reserved young heir of Kang Group, one of the most powerful conglomerates on the East Coast. He was sharp-suited, guarded, and exhausted from a life built entirely around other people's expectations. She was warm, plain-spoken, and completely unimpressed by his money. They fell in love the ordinary way, in coffee shops and late phone calls, long before the tabloids ever learned her name. They married quietly. A year later they had a daughter, Hannah, a little girl with her father's serious eyes and her mother's easy laugh. For a while it truly was enough. Then, just after Hannah's first birthday, the doctors found something wrong in her blood. A rare bone marrow disorder, the kind that makes a parent memorize words they never wanted to learn. Jaylah and Min-Jun spent months in hospital hallways, holding hands so tightly their fingers went numb. It was Dr. Osei, Hannah's hematologist, who first explained that if Hannah ever needed a transplant, the family would need a matching donor. Min-Jun's side tested as partial matches only. Jaylah, quietly, without telling anyone outside that room, tested as a full match. She said nothing to Min-Jun's mother about it. She simply promised Dr. Osei she would keep herself available, no matter what happened in her marriage. She meant it as a mother's private vow. No one else was supposed to hear it. But a sick child is a slow-burning fire under any marriage, and this one was no exception. Min-Jun's mother, Grace Kang, chairwoman of Kang Group, had never approved of her son marrying a schoolteacher with no family fortune and no useful business alliance behind her name. At first it was small things, a comment about Jaylah's modest wardrobe at a company gala, a pointed question about whether Brightwood Elementary was really the right environment for a Kang. As Hannah's illness dragged on and the medical bills stacked higher than either parent wanted to admit out loud, Grace grew louder about it, and busier introducing her son to a young woman named Sujin Park, daughter of an allied shipping family, at every function she could arrange. Min-Jun, hollowed out by fear for his daughter and worn thin by his mother's constant pressure, stopped coming home for dinner most nights. He told himself work was the reason. In truth, he was pulling away from his wife exactly when she needed him closest, and neither of them had the energy left to say so out loud. That was when Jaylah started disappearing for a few hours every few months. No explanation. No warning. Just her coat, her purse, and a quiet, "I'll be back before dinner." What none of them knew was where she was really going. If you have ever loved someone quietly without needing credit for it, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is about to test exactly how far that kind of love can be pushed. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight, because in about 2 minutes, everything you think you know about Jaylah Bishop is going to change completely. The humiliation came on an ordinary Tuesday. Jaylah pulled into the Brightwood Elementary parking lot at pickup time, the same as she had every day since Hannah was 2. But when she reached the classroom door, A new assistant she'd never met stopped her with a clipboard and an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the approved pickup list anymore." Other parents turned to look. A woman Jaylah recognized from the PDA whispered something behind her hand. Jaylah stood there in the hallway of the school where she herself taught kindergarten 2 buildings over, being told she no longer had the right to collect her own daughter, and she understood in that moment that someone had already decided who she was before she'd said a single word in her own defense. What Jaylah didn't know yet was exactly how far it had gone. Soo-Jin Park, sensing an opening in a marriage already cracking under grief and exhaustion, had hired a private investigator months earlier. The investigator's photographs showed Jaylah entering a private clinic downtown, alone, several times over the past year. They showed her entering a law office twice, carrying folders, speaking quietly with an attorney. To anyone who didn't know the truth, the pictures told a simple, damning story. A wife quietly planning her exit, securing money, maybe even meeting someone else. Soo-Jin brought the folder to Grace Kang first. Grace brought it to her son. Min-Jun confronted Jaylah in their own kitchen, the folder shaking slightly in his hand, exhaustion and grief and betrayal all fighting for space on his face. "Just tell me where you've been going," he said. "Tell me it isn't what it looks like." And here was the cruelest part of the entire misunderstanding. Jaylah could have explained everything in 30 seconds. But something in her, something proud and wounded and utterly exhausted from carrying a sick child's fear alone while her husband disappeared into his mother's control, refused to defend herself to a man who was already halfway to believing the worst. "If you have to ask," she said quietly, "then you've already decided what you believe. Nothing I say is going to change that tonight." She was wrong about that, but she wouldn't understand how wrong for 2 more years. Here's a question worth sitting with before we go any further. If someone you loved looked you in the eye and refused to defend themselves, would you assume the worst, or would you trust everything you built together up to that point? Type your honest answer in the comments, because what Jaylah was actually hiding is about to change how you see every single person in this story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment, because the next few minutes get very real. Here is what those photographs never showed. The clinic downtown wasn't an affair. It was Jaylah's yearly re-verification appointment, quietly renewing her status as Hannah's one full genetic match, exactly as she'd promised Dr. Say 3 years earlier, regardless of what happened to her marriage. The law office wasn't about a divorce settlement or hidden money for herself. Jaylah had taken nearly all of her personal savings, money her late grandmother left her, and placed it into an irrevocable trust with Hannah as the sole beneficiary, to cover any medical need insurance wouldn't touch, no matter what happened between her and Min-Jun. She told no one, because she never wanted her daughter's care to look like a bargaining chip in a marriage that was already falling apart. She wanted it to be unconditional. She wanted it to be real. And because she refused to explain herself to a husband who wouldn't simply trust her, an entire family walked away believing she was exactly the kind of woman his mother always warned him about. The divorce moved fast after that. Grace Kang's lawyers were thorough and merciless, painting a picture of an unstable, money-motivated ex-wife, until Jaylah, drained and grieving and unwilling to drag Hannah through a public custody war in the tabloids, agreed to limited supervised visitation just to make the bleeding stop. She lost the house. She lost the friends who suddenly stopped calling. She kept her classroom, her dignity, and a small folded hospital bracelet from the week Hannah was born, the kind hospitals give mother and baby as a matching set, which she'd rest-strung onto a thin gold chain and never once taken off, hidden under her collar where nobody could ask her about it. 14 months later, Min-Jun married Soo-Jin Park in a wedding covered by 3 business magazines. Jaylah watched Hannah grow up mostly through photographs sent by a court-appointed supervisor. One Saturday afternoon a month, always polite, always heartbreakingly short. And yet, every single time she picked Hannah up for those Saturdays, she said the same quiet words into her daughter's hair. "No matter where I am, I'm always still your mommy." Hannah believed her completely, in the uncomplicated way that children believe the people who show up. What almost nobody noticed in those quiet 2 years was how the power in that family had already begun to shift. Soo-Jin, once so warm in public, grew visibly cold toward a little girl who wasn't hers, sighing audibly whenever a hospital appointment interrupted her social calendar, and once, in front of household staff, calling Hannah's illness exhausting for everyone. Grace Kang, who missed very little in her own house, heard that comment and said nothing at the time. But she remembered it. Watching her new daughter-in-law's patience run thin in exactly the moments that mattered most, Grace began, for the first time in her life, to quietly wonder if she had misjudged something important. And Min-Jun, standing at the edge of a school recital one evening, watched from a distance as Jaylah knelt down to fix Hannah's hair ribbon with the same tenderness she'd always had, and felt something crack open in his chest that he didn't have a name for yet. He told himself it was nothing. He went home to a marriage that increasingly felt like a boardroom merger instead of a family. Then Hannah's illness came back. I need you to predict something before we go any further, because I promise you will not see this coming. Do you think the doctor is about to reveal something about Jaylah, or about someone else in this story entirely? Comment your prediction right now, because in less than 90 seconds the truth comes out in a hospital hallway, and it changes absolutely everything. Which brings us back to that 2:47 a.m. phone call. Hannah's bone marrow disorder had quietly progressed for months, undetected until a routine checkup turned into an emergency admission. By the time Jaylah reached Hartwell Children's Hospital, the family was already gathered in a private waiting room, and the news was worse than anyone had said out loud. Hannah needed an emergency transplant, and she needed a matching donor within days, not months. Min-Jun tested again, still only a partial match. Soo-jin, asked directly by Dr. Osei whether she was willing to be tested, hesitated so long that Grace Kang finally answered for her. And the silence in that room told everyone everything they needed to know about where Soo-jin's loyalty actually lived. Grace herself was too old to be considered. The family's private specialists were running out of options, and panic was climbing the walls. That was when Dr. Osei walked in holding a folder Jaylah recognized instantly, because it had her own handwriting on the cover. There's already a full match on file, Dr. Osei said, looking directly at Min-Jun. Verified and renewed 3 months ago. It's Jaylah. The room went silent. She has kept her donor status active every single year since your divorce, the doctor continued. Without being asked, without being paid, and without ever telling either of you. Min-Jun's face went white. Grace Kang sat down slowly in a plastic hospital chair, as if her legs had simply stopped working. And when Dr. Osei quietly added that Hannah's medical trust, the one that had quietly covered 2 years of specialist bills nobody in the family had ever questioned, had been funded entirely by Jaylah's inheritance, Min-Jun finally understood exactly what those old photographs had actually shown. Not an affair. Not a scheme. A mother alone protecting her daughter in complete silence, from a family that had thrown her away for it. It was Hannah, half awake and frightened in her hospital bed, who delivered the moment that broke everyone in that room completely. She reached weakly for her mother's wrist, where the thin gold chain had slipped loose from Jaylah's collar in the rush to get there. That's the same as mine, Hannah whispered, touching the small hospital bracelet hanging beside Jaylah's pulse, the twin of the one still taped into Hannah's own baby book at home. Jaylah had never told her daughter what that bracelet meant. She had simply never taken it off. If a moment like that hit you the way it just hit me, tell me in the comments what saved really means to you. Because we are one scene away from finding out if 2 years of silence can finally become justice. Hit subscribe before we get there, because this ending has earned it. The truth unraveled quickly after that. Min-Jun's own attorney, re-examining the private investigator's original file at Dr. Osei's insistence, found what Soo-jin had always hoped no one would check twice. Timestamps proving the clinic visits lined up exactly with Hannah's routine re-verification schedule, and law office records confirming the irrevocable trust, filed months before the divorce was even threatened. Confronted in front of Grace Kang, Soo-jin didn't deny it. She simply said the marriage had needed a push, and that she'd never expected anyone to look closely enough to catch her. Kang Group's board did not see it that way. Neither, in the end, did Min-Jun, who filed for an annulment within the week and personally corrected the record with every relative, every business partner, and every reporter who had ever printed his ex-wife's name beside the word unstable. Jaylah donated the marrow that saved her daughter's life 3 days later, in the same hospital wing where she'd once quietly promised Dr. Osei she'd always be available, no matter what. Hannah recovered slowly but completely, and Min-Jun, humbled in a way his family's money had never once required of him before, did not ask Jaylah for forgiveness in the hallway that week, or even that month. Instead, he did something harder. He named exactly what he'd done wrong out loud without excuses. He returned full parental rights to Jaylah immediately, and without a single condition attached. He stepped back from his mother's control over Kang Group's decisions for the first time in his adult life. And for the better part of a year, he simply showed up, consistently, quietly proving through actions instead of apologies that he had actually changed. Jaylah did not rush back into his arms, and this story respects her too much to pretend she should have. Forgiveness came slowly, in small honest conversations at school pickups that were, once again, entirely legal. Some weeks he simply asked how her classroom was doing and actually listened to the answer. Other weeks he said nothing at all, and let his consistency speak for him instead. Trust rebuilt itself the only way it ever really does. One kept promise at a time with no guarantee attached to any of them. Nearly a year later, at Hannah's kindergarten graduation, Min-Jun knelt down to fasten a small new charm onto that same thin gold chain around his daughter's wrist. A tiny matching one made for Jaylah too. And for the first time in 2 years, Jaylah let him. "No matter where I am," she whispered into Hannah's hair one more time that afternoon, "I'm always still your mommy." This time Min-Jun heard it too and understood finally that he was the one still learning how true those words had been every single day he doubted her. Real love doesn't announce itself with photographs or headlines or private investigators. Sometimes it just keeps a promise for 2 years in complete silence, expecting absolutely nothing back. If this story moved you tonight, that's exactly why we tell them. This is Hanverse Love Stories, where every quiet sacrifice eventually finds its witness. Subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Tell me in the comments. Do you think Jaylah should have explained herself that night in the kitchen? Or was she right to let the truth take its time? I'll see you in the next story.